Who would ever wear a springlock suit willingly? Who would knowingly walk into a robot whose metal guts were stretched tenuously open by springs under immense pressure? A pressure that could give out at any moment and crush the spring suit wearer so thoroughly that no one would even know their remains were still in the robot. William Afton did. Who would climb into a high-tech version of the ancient Iron Maiden torture device that would pierce their human flesh with 100 razor blades even when it was working properly? William Afton did. Who would strap themselves into a machine they knew was designed to drain the living soul of its wearer into the living metal of the robot? A device that would hold them mangled and helpless as their living essence was torn from their organic body and drained into the very instrument of their death, forcing circuits, jagged metal, and pain to become part of them forever. William Afton did. And he wasn't the only one. Each member of the Afton family had at least one robot to call their own. A character that not only represented them, but acted as an alter ego. And while the two golden spring suits may have been special hollow hybrids, all the classic animatronics of Freddy's were spring suits. Henry wore Dreadbear in FNAF 4. William wore his version of Foxy and Foxy Go-Go when he was convicted of luring the 5 missing children incident kids to their doom. Michael Afton, using the fake name Jimmy Fitzgerald, wore his Freddy suit all of FNAF 2, and years earlier at the very first Freddy's in Take Cake to the Children, when the robots were forbidden from moving on their own during the day without a pilot. Henry's twin children Sammy and Charlie were lured into the golden suits on June 26, 1983, and died in them, becoming the Shadow animatronics. And this is only the beginning. At one point, every member of the extended Afton family stepped into a spring suit death trap, willingly or otherwise. But why? William gives us a clue in the Silver Eyes. When he isn't wearing his spring bodysuit, he seems drained, only half a person, like he wasn't truly complete without the metal springs tearing into his flesh and linking him to the animatronic. He's even proud to show Carlton all the springlock scars covering his skin. When you die in a spring suit, all of your soul goes into the metal, haunting that robot until it's destroyed. But what if you don't die, and use a spring suit properly, letting the metal springs cut into your flesh? When you wear your spring suit, everything's fine. But when you take it off, half of you remains behind. I'm Blackfoot Ferret, and welcome to the Ferret Theory. This is the Afton family Horcruxes. The third and final video in my Five Nights at Freddy's Master Series, FNAF Shorts. If I'd known how epic the story would become when I started my research, I'd have chosen a name other than Shorts. But even now, 3 years later, I'm still learning new things about FNAF. And I have a lot to share with you today. Get ready for the FNAF 3 crash course of a lifetime. Episode 1, Solidig and FNAF, explored how the spring suits were deliberately designed to absorb souls. The haunting of the animatronics was a deliberate goal of mad science, never some cosmic accident. Episode 2, The Summer Paradox, laid out the timeline for all the murders at Freddy's. This includes the secret 2-child kill event on June 26th that created the Shadows, and their attempts to frame William for the later, more famous murders. The Summer Paradox shows how one act of evil created an escalating spiral of revenge that destroyed everything in its path, and how FNAF is a parable about how revenge is not the answer to anyone's problems. I've released several smaller, more focused theories under the theoretical shorts banner after the Summer Paradox. These quickly explain how spring suits absorb souls, and why I believe Shadow Freddy attacks us in FNAF 1 rather than Golden Freddy, and how the metal cables that infest FNAF 1 through 3 are the very same type of living metal cables the Funtime animatronics are made of, to name a few. But today our goal is to map the Afton family tree, and uncover the great secret the family used to try and achieve robotic immortality. Because although our favorite animatronics were being used to kill and harvest the souls of children and night guards by the time of FNAF 1, their original purpose wasn't to take life, but to preserve it. And it all begins with one question. What is a Horcrux? In the Harry Potter books, the evil wizard Voldemort survived his first death by splitting his soul into several pieces, which he bound to objects and creatures for safekeeping. By doing this, he created several backup copies of himself that could take over if anything happened to the original. The only way to truly kill Tom Riddle was to find and destroy every last one of his Horcruxes, then defeat him one last time. To create a Horcrux, a wizard had to deliberately damage their own soul by committing murder, then use the right spell to tear their essence completely in half and bind the severed soul shard to an object. But in the world of Five Nights at Freddy's, the Aftons found a simpler, more mechanical means of making a Horcrux through mad science rather than magic: the spring suits. Because the Afton spring suits weren't just a curiosity, but the core of everything that made FNAF possible. And I'm about to prove to you why absorbing human souls is the only possible purpose for the spring suit's bizarre design. Part 1. How to turn humans into robots that into human-looking androids. First, for their declared purpose of being costumes to entertain children, the spring suits are a terrible design. Each suit is basically a real working 80s transformer, capable of being fully functional even when all its inner parts are collapsed to the shell of the costume. A good fursuit can cost several $1,000s, but a state-of-the-art mechanical suit like this would cost millions of dollars, assuming you could even find a government Black Ops project capable of building one that worked. The expense of equipping an entire cast of performers with spring suits is staggering, and well beyond the budget of a humble pizza parlor. Transforming aside, the technology necessary to create a humanoid robot capable of walking and thinking for itself alone is incredible, and only now becoming possible by modern science. While such a marvelous robot is still pricey, it would be much simpler and cheaper just to put an autonomous robot in a fursuit and not worry about spring locks or transformative abilities at all. Then there's the issue of safety. Spring suits put a human being inside a stretched metal cage that could fail and crush the life out of its pilot if even one of the spring locks fails. The Silver Eyes showed us that the jarring motion of a spring lock going off can easily set off the others around it like dominoes or firecrackers, causing a chain reaction that results in the entire spring suit failing. One wrong move, one wrong breath, and the spring suit will kill the person inside. It's hard to imagine anything more dangerous. And all this danger could be removed by a simple redesign. Why make an endoskeleton, stretched open by springs, when you could simply make an exoskeleton with empty space inside that was designed to hold a human pilot from the beginning? No spring locks, no threat of crushing death, just a set of power armor you can wear under the fursuit. While this still seems like overkill when it comes to entertaining kids, this is the 80s, so it might be nice to have Freddy double as Iron Man if terrorists declare war on pizza. The cost and safety issues of the spring suits seem overwhelming. They are literally the worst costume design in the world. And yet, the Aftons insisted on this very design from the beginning. Carlton's suit predated the hybrid Golden suits, and Henry warned his twin children Sammy and Charlie to never put their hands in any of the mascot costumes, because they all contain spring locks. The Night 4 phone call of FNAF 3 features a message recorded from the manager of Fredbear's family diner, which had the two Golden suits, talking about an incident at the sister location, i.e. the new and improved Freddy's of FNAF 2, involving multiple simultaneous spring lock failures. Since the failure of one spring lock causes the entire suit to fail, there's no such thing as multiple failures on a single suit. This call is talking about several different spring suits failing at once. An incredibly improbable event, unless the spring suits were sabotaged as an act of murder. The two Golden suits were already accounted for at Fredbear's, so the existence of even one spring lock failure at the other restaurant proves there must have been at least 3 spring suits, with multiple failures putting the number far above that. The Aftons loved their spring suits, and didn't want to part with them generation after generation, no matter what went wrong. Even when several people died at once, their suspension was only temporary while replacements were being made. It's easy to say the Aftons were crazy, but there must have been a method to their madness. This family was able to make walking, thinking humanoid robots in the 1970s, and already had robots with facial recognition in the 80s, when primitive personal computers were struggling their way into existence. The Aftons were mad scientists in every sense of the word, able to create robotic wonders far ahead of their time for purposes we could barely imagine. So even if the spring suits seem impractical to us, the Aftons deliberately insisted on the spring suit design for purposes of their own. And it's up to us to discover what benefit they hope to gain from these metal death traps. A clue can be found in the Twisted ones, where the Twisted animatronics use spring locks like metal teeth to chew out whatever human they were able to trap inside them. But they weren't looking for meat. Wolfie spat out his victim while she was still alive, seemingly satisfied after getting what he wanted and having no use for her anymore. Another hint at what's really happening is how Carlton was only lightly injured by spring locks while William trapped him in the prototype suit. And yet, despite receiving neck injuries at worst, Carlton shows symptoms of a full-blown brain concussion after his experience, and begins acting darker, showing less of his usual humor, as if something essential had been drained from him. Charlie experiences a waking nightmare after she drops through the skylight in the Silver Eyes, believing for a moment that she's being devoured by a metal endoskeleton. This nightmare might actually be a flashback, because William tells her in the next book that he killed her when she was 3 years old. The Rosetta Stone to FNAF is found in a hidden message inside the FNAF 1 Night 5 phone call, a garbled reference to Chapter 8 of The Autobiography of a Yogi. This book details the strange findings of Dr. Bose, a scientist from India in the 1940s. Chapter 8 specifically covers the theory of living metal, and experiments that prove that, at least on a small scale, inorganic metal possesses the ability to heal, grow, or die just like organic flesh. This means a metal body isn't just cold and soulless, but could actually, literally, be alive. That a robot could be just as alive as a human being, if only you could find a way to put a soul into one. When springlocks cut into the flesh of their wearer, they create a connection between the organic human and metallic robot, essentially merging both halves into one being. If you connect a full container of liquid to an empty container, the fluid will drain from the full container into the empty one until both reach a balance, an equilibrium. And this is what happens to the living soul energy of the pilot once the springlocks connect them to the robot. Their life force flows into the empty metal vessel, and stays in the robot once the springlocks are disengaged. This is how Horcrux animatronics are created. And this is also how the twisted animatronics drain the souls from their prey. The spring suits aren't just a curiosity, they're the key to everything, and this is why the Aftons adopted their seemingly insane design. Now, I just mentioned that at the end of the Twisted Ones, William tells teenage Charlie that he didn't take Sammy, I took you. Meaning that not only are Charlie's early childhood memories wrong, William stuffed her into a spring suit when she was 3. But Charlie isn't a hulking animatronic, she seems human. How is this possible? Seeming human isn't quite the same as being human. The second book revealed that William Afton had fake blood, and synthetic flesh that refused to rot even though spring-trapped William had spent an entire year stuffed into a cubbyhole behind Foxy's stage. This is even more telling in the games, because FNAF 3 Springtrap had been stuck in the secret room for 30 years, and yet still had shreds of flesh clinging to him that looked surprisingly fresh. This cannot be real human flesh. Normal human tissue would have rotted away swiftly after death, and disintegrated completely to dust by the end of a year. And yet, despite being locked away for years, the silverized animatronics still reeked of putrid flesh, and even seemed to breathe. And FNAF 1 tells of animatronics that still leaked blood and mucus long after the child victims had been stuffed inside them. Flesh that stubbornly, impossibly, insisted on living despite being mangled beyond any recognition or function. Both William and the 5 child victims were something more than human at the time when they were stuffed. The traces of their synthetic blood and flesh prove this. Another famous android was Eggs Benedict from Sister Location, later revealed to be William's son Michael Afton. Michael munched popcorn each time he watched The Immortal and the Restless, clearly able to digest food like a regular human. But on night 4, all thoughts of normal humanity ended. First, Michael was somehow able to manipulate the springlocks inside Funtime Chica while trapped inside the wiggle-tight springsuit, with no means of using his fingers. But the most telling detail is that no matter what Michael did on night 4, a horde of large mini-Renas would always crawl into the suit with him and showed no signs of leaving. There was no room in that wiggle-tight suit for any of them. The mini-Renas must have burrowed inside Michael's body, causing massive injuries that would kill any normal human. But after escaping, Michael goes right back to eating popcorn, seemingly unfazed. But something is terribly wrong. When Michael first enters Parts in Service on night 5, the usual drips.mp3 background sound is playing. But the very instant he begins to type on deactivated baby's keypad, drips turns into the subtly different guts.mp3, where the sound of dripping liquid is augmented by the sickly sweet sound of wet flesh being torn from bone. But Michael is the only one in the room with flesh. The guts sound follows Michael back into Funtime Auditorium, where no dripping sound was heard before. And this sound doesn't diminish in volume, no matter how many steps Michael takes. A sound that is coming from what currently remains of his body, as the mini-Renas that were still hiding inside it get to work, removing any flesh they can find. The guts sound only stops when Michael enters the scooping room or the private office, because by this time the mini-Renas have finished their work, leaving whatever still remains of him for the scooper or entered. When Michael gets scooped, he gets hit by a massive hydraulic ram designed to shatter and extract the living metal from inside the Funtime animatronics. A hit from this device would smash any normal human into gruesome paste, which is why Enter didn't try it on the 2 human technicians, since scooping them would be useless. But when the scooper hits Michael, it rebounds off him with a sharp metallic clang, and recoils as if hitting something heavy and solid with an equal mass. And although the scooper should be covered with blood and torn organs after the strike, it's impossibly clean and bloodless. When Ender jump scares Michael in the private room, there's a frame where we get to see Michael's reflection in the mirror-like sheen of Ennard's mask. This reflection looks very much like the endoskeleton inside of Springtrap, which is why I originally thought it must have been Springtrap's endoskeleton, although the reflection is showing the other eye instead. This section of Ennard's mask is directly perpendicular to Michael's field of vision, just like a mirror, and the light he's seeing is a light that's being reflected directly back at him. There is no possibility that this image is showing part of Ennard. Physics says this must be a reflection of Michael. There are no eyeballs anywhere on Ennard with a glowing iris. By the time Michael leaves Funtime Auditorium, he is nothing more than a bare metal endoskeleton, like Arnold's Terminator with its synthetic flesh torn off. As for Charlie being an android herself, the clues are scattered all through the novels. Unusual strength and dexterity, clammy hands, a doll-like face that doesn't reflect her inner pain, being able to take repeated slashes from Foxy, injuries that would put any normal human in the emergency room and walk them off with common drugstore bandages, having a photographic memory as a teenager, but struggling with fractured, seemingly hacked memories of her early life, where entire sections of her life are missing. And then William revealing that he stuffed her instead of Sammy that fateful night at Fredbear's family diner. Aunt Jen coached Charlie to never go to a hospital, because if she did go, they'd discover that her blood was every bit as fake as William's. William was an android. Michael was an android. Charlie was an android, and all 5 of the missing children incident victims were also androids, whose mangled synthetic flesh refused to die. All of this hints that the ambitions of the Afton family went far beyond just creating backup robotic Horcruxes for themselves. The Aftons discovered a way to turn themselves completely into robots, then disguise this fact from the world with a coating of Terminator-style synthetic flesh, regaining all their lost human functionality. And the key to the second evolution of the Aftons can be seen in their 2 favorite endoskeleton designs, the Endo 1 and Endo 2. The Endo 2 model is the classic spring suit, where all the limbs are metal cages designed for a human to fit inside. The Endo 1 is a bone-thin metal stick figure with solid metal limbs. The Endo 1 cannot be stretched open to allow a human inside. Instead, it's designed from the ground up to fit inside a human. In fact, the Endo 1 can fit inside the Endo 2, and in the same manner that a soul can pass from a living human into an empty Endo 2 spring suit, an extracted soul contained in an Endo 2 can pass back into an empty Endo 1 to regain the shape and scale of a human skeleton. And once this now possessed Endo 1 gets a coating of the Afton family's special Terminator-style synthetic flesh, it can regain human appearance and even mimic the same look of the original human. So by uploading their soul into a spring suit, transferring that extracted soul back into an Endo 1, then covering that Endo 1 with synthetic flesh, a fragile mortal human can convert themselves into a super-powered mortal android that looked like them, and no one but a medical expert would be the wiser. How good is Afton's synthetic flesh? It's a marvel of nanotechnology. Michael Afton was able to completely regain his flesh and ability to eat popcorn, and look like Rick Astley in the mirror, once he got home from sister location, even though the mini-arenas stripped him down to a bare metal endoskeleton only hours earlier. Charlie's synthetic flesh was so realistic, even she thought she was human, until William informed her that he'd already killed her once. She was able to eat like a normal human, feel touch like a normal human, and gain some muscle by doing sit-ups in the second book, again like a normal human. But Charlie also had a problem. While all of her friends had grown and visibly changed in the year between books, Charlie stayed exactly the same. This eventually became so obvious that Charlie felt self-conscious about it, and tried cutting her hair differently, or doing sit-ups in an attempt to look different. It didn't work though, and her friends still thought she looked the same. One downside to being an immortal android is that a metal endoskeleton can't grow and change. Only the flesh can. Once someone becomes an Afton android, they stay the same size and age forever. Now, this is a big problem. While a non-aging android might be able to fool human society for a little while, people are eventually going to realize something is up and start asking questions. The family from Tuck Everlasting had to keep moving to keep their immortal secret safe. If Charlie remains a teenager forever, a government Black Ops project will eventually come looking for her. Especially if her synthetic flesh develops a glitch like Michael's did in Sister Location's Custom Night, and the tabloids start a hunt for Zombie Robot Girl. For that matter, if Charlie first died and became a robot when she was 3, and all her friends in Hurricane remember her as an adolescent at Freddy's years after, how did Charlie become a robo-teen in the first place? Remember that while Afton robots can't grow and change on their own, it's still possible to transfer a soul from one robot into another. And if you want to simulate a child growing up, you just have to make a larger android for them, and move their soul, their remnant, to the new form.